Hello and welcome back to Creative World of Photography and Videography. My name is Jay from Jay's Creative Image. I have seen some great photograph where the subject is in focus and the background is in out of focus. I think that is called the depth of field or shallow depth of field. So how do you do that? I have a few examples of images of shallow depth of field where you will clearly see a subject is in focus and the background is in out of focus. So that is what is called the depth of field or shallow depth of field. So you selectively focus on the subject and let the rest of the image on out of focus. So let's do some experiment and see how does it work. So here's my daughter Javisha. She's going to be modeling us to experiment how does this depth of field works. So here I'm taking few picture of Javisha focusing on her. So with the correct combination of setting, I can determine how much is going to be focused and how much is the background is going to be out of focus. So I also can keep everything on focus, like a subject and the background also on the focus with the correct combination of settings. So there are three things that controls the depth of field. Number one is aperture, number two is focal length, number three is distance from your subject. So let's experiment each of these elements one by one and explore how the shallow depth of field works. Let's experiment the first element, the aperture. To use this method to get a shallow depth of field, you need a larger opening of your lens. So when larger opening your lens mean you need a larger opening of an aperture. That means a smaller number in value. So for example, if we can see in the lens, it has an aperture value of 1.4, 1.8, 2.8, f4. When the value of the aperture comes down, the blade of the aperture opens wider. That's why it is called a larger opening of an aperture. Let me illustrate by showing you the series of photos I took. In this series, I took picture of same subject from the same location using the same focal length. The only thing I change is aperture value. I went from a very small opening of aperture value to very large aperture opening. Let's take these shots. Well, there's no doubt the aperture value has an impact on a shallow depth of field. So many photographers only consider the aperture value when they are trying to take a shallow depth of field. So and that can be a very big mistake. So in the beginning I explained to you there are three important things that take a part in this shallow depth of field. First one is a aperture, second one is a focal length, third one is a distance from the subject. Secondly, so I'm going to use a focal length from my lens to take a depth of field photography. Let's take a look at this series of photos again. This time I'm going to be changing my focal length and leaving aperture value alone. So I'm shooting the same series, zooming the lens in and out, but leaving the aperture same value and shooting from the same distance from the subject. So let's take a look at the pictures. So finally, let's talk about the distance from the subject. So your physical distance between your subject and you is going to impact on the shallow depth of field. So closer you are at your subject, the shallower of the depth of field. So this time I'm going to leave my aperture value and focal length alone, and I'm going to move from the subject, physically move from back and forth and take some shots. So let's try and experiment how this distance from the subject works. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Okay, then I'm coming closer. 2, 3, 4, 5. So in summary, when we are talking about depth of field, there are three things impact on this shallow depth of field. One is aperture value, two is a focal length, and three is a distance from the subject. Hope you guys like this video. If you like this, please thumbs up and ask me if you have any questions in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe. I will see you in the next video with an interesting subject. Until then, keep clicking, keep creating.